Well, I suppose I might do at least one thing slightly seasonal for October. So, it ain't exactly a new movie, but it's one that I rewatched lately, so gonna talk about it. I recently rewatched The Woman in Black, and this is a film that I wish was on more people's radar. And actually, I would say that anyone who really enjoyed Haunting of Hill House or Haunting of Bly Manor really should check out The Woman in Black if you've never seen it. It's from, I think, about 2010. It stars Daniel Radcliffe. It's a period piece. It takes place in the early 20th century, and it's insanely atmospheric. And that's the main reason why I would encourage anyone who liked Haunting of Hill House or Bly Manor to check it out, because what it absolutely excels at is that atmosphere and that sense of foreboding and dread you just get being in the space. I'm not going to say it's jump scare free. It isn't. But honestly, it will make you much more afraid of an empty hallway than of, an actual ghost. That's the real strength and beauty of this film. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, though. So Daniel Radcliffe plays a young man who he's a barrister. It's a kind of like being a lawyer, and he is being sent to basically shore up the final affairs of a woman who recently passed away, who owned this massive manor called Eelmarsh House. Now, boy, first of all, just the setting, and I don't just mean the house itself, because the house itself is plenty spooky, but just getting there, it's already like, wait, what? Because you have to drive on this road through this marsh, and it can only be driven on at certain points, because when the tide comes in, the marsh floods the road, and people have died going off the road into the muck and the marsh and been sucked down. And so just getting there, it's already like, what? But he's got to go there and go through all and any paperwork or documentation at the house itself, so that his firm can be certain that the last will and testament they have of hers is in fact her last will and testament. Because the last thing they need is for them to assume they have it, and then somebody later to go through stuff at that house and it goes, oh no, wait a minute. So they got to make sure their ducks are in order. He's being sent there kind of as basically his last chance to make good, because he's been floundering at this firm since his wife passed away, giving birth to his son. So Daniel Radcliffe, in addition to it taking place in a haunted house, he's playing a very haunted person, and he's quite good at it. He expresses a lot of pain and anguish without a ton of lines. He speaks, he has lines, but he doesn't really say anything particularly memorable. It's all about the expression that he gives throughout it. And honestly, it's just kind of refreshing to see a story like this have a male protagonist, just because if for no other reason than it blows past the normal thing that usually happens with a female lead, which is people write it off as her being hysterical. That doesn't happen here. Actually, it doesn't happen here for two reasons. One, it's a guy. And two, everyone in the village near this house telling him, don't go up there. So they already believe there's some nasty stuff up there. And so it completely blows past I'm sure you were imagining. There's one character who kind of has that perspective, but it's very clear that, he desperately needs it to be nothing. It's kind of vital to his sense of being. That's the character of Sam, played by Syrian Hines, who's also very good. All the acting is good in this, but it is ultimately that atmosphere that rules this movie. And I'm also rather fond of the resolution and the ending. And so consider that your spoiler warning, because I am going to talk about it now. So if you haven't seen the film, and if you like ghost stories and you like atmospheric horror, watch The Woman in Black. I haven't seen the sequel thing that they did. I don't know if that's any good. I didn't hear good things, so I'm not going to encourage you to watch that. But watch this, then come back and watch the spoiler section. Okay, so there's a couple of things I like about the ending. The first is there's a wonderful bittersweet melancholy to the very end, because at the very end, Daniel Radcliffe's character and his young son, his 4-year-old son, die. But it ends in a note of him being reunited with his wife and, holding his young son and his wife's hand and going to a better place. But the fact that they die, that's sort of the other thing. So the Woman in Black's entire deal is that she had given birth to a son who somewhat creepily has my name. So, yeah, that's a little... Anyway, I'd forgotten about that until rewatching it. But she had a son, and the son was taken into the guardianship of her sister because the mother was deemed mentally unfit to raise her child. And they basically barred her from seeing her son, which was something she became increasingly bitter about. Daniel Radcliffe's character uncovers letters that, written by this woman, and each one from a later period, the handwriting is getting worse and worse and worse, and like the tone is getting harsher and more violent. And what ended up happening was the carriage with the adopted mother and the son went into the marsh, and the mother got out and the boy didn't. And so his birth mother holds an immense grudge because, in her view, her sister saved herself and let her son die. So she is angry. But it is actually really important that it establishes this rage was already there before he died, that there is already questions about her mental stability, because this isn't just a matter of her being angry at one person. She's mad at everyone and everything. She's not distinguishing. This is indiscriminate havoc that she is wreaking, because the whole thing that happens and why everyone's telling him not to go to the house is anytime someone sees the Woman in Black, who's only around at the house, anytime anyone sees her, then somewhere in the village, a child dies. Sometimes by accident, oftentimes by their own hand. The Woman in Black lures children to their death. It's actually the opening scene of the film, as we see 3 young girls playing a tea party with dolls, and they'll just stop, get up, go to the windows, and they all jump out. And there's a couple of scenes like that. And it's unsettling. But the thing is that none of the... It's not like a Freddy Krueger situation where... Because, Freddy, in that first movie at least, was targeting the children specifically of the people who vigilante murdered him. So, yes, he was going for children, but there was a reason he was going after these specific children. The Woman in Black doesn't have that justification. She's just taking children. Any children. So that other parents will suffer the pain she suffered. And so it actually tracks really well that even after Daniel Radcliffe and Ciarán Hinds find the sunken carriage where her son died in the marsh and haul it out and take this body of a young boy and place it in his room in the house, and there is this reunion between the spirit of the Woman in Black and her son, that she's still pissed off and she's still going to take Daniel Radcliffe's son, because this was never about finding peace. This wasn't even about vengeance. This was about just making everyone else feel her pain that she possibly could. And she didn't stop. She's not gonna stop. So that tracks, and I feel like it I remember it sort of sinking in that she was still coming for the boy at the tail end of the movie, and it is a very sinking feeling, but it makes sense. It could have just been a twist. There are sometimes where sometimes when a horror movie ends badly for the main characters, it feels like a very, we just want to get you one more time. That's how I feel about the original Friday the 13th. That's how I feel about Drag Me to Hell. I don't get a lot out of that. Here, it tracks much better for me than it usually does with those sorts of moves. I also watched it with Liz, who did a thing. She did a thing that she tends to do, which is to find one thing and like she's right, but I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that, or I didn't think of that. I'm like, oh, nuts. And like, I'm not mad at her for this because she's right, but it's like, oh, for God's sake, this is not an edition of Liz ruins it with feminism, though there'll be more of those in the future. This wasn't that kind of critique, but okay. So I think it's the second time Daniel Radcliffe goes to the house, and he decides he's actually going to stay there overnight because it's easier than, leaving and coming back, and he just wants to try and get the work done. And Syrian Hines, who has driven him up there, says, "Here, take my dog so that you have some companionship." And we see the dog. The dog like barks at the woman at a few points, and then at a certain point, basically like at the night to dawn break, the dog just stops showing up, and nobody mentions the dog again. We don't see the dog. Like, even in the car on the ride back, we don't see the dog. So, like, the dog is completely unaccounted for, and nobody mentions the dog whatsoever. The movie seemed to basically just forget that the dog existed, and that really bugged Liz a lot because she was super concerned for the welfare of that dog. And we don't know what happened to the dog. I love Liz to death, but I'm not going to be able to watch this movie again without thinking about that now. So there's an uplifting note to a dour horror film for the spoopy Halloween season. Hope you enjoyed that. Have you seen The Woman in Black? What are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Usual stuff. Like, share, subscribe. I have a Patreon, which is how I pay the bills and I'm able to digitally rent things like this and also, eat things like that. So any support you can lend there at any amount is greatly appreciated. But even if you don't, that's okay. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break.